India is preparing for what could become its biggest military reform since independence, viewers. The government is moving closer to implementing integrated theatre commands, a long-awaited restructuring that will bring the Army, Navy and Air Force under unified operational commands. Instead of functioning through separate service-specific commands, India's armed forces will operate through 3 theatre commands focused on the northern, western and maritime fronts. The reform aims to enhance jointness, speed up decision-making and improve combat readiness for modern multi-domain warfare. Proposed after the Kargil conflict and strengthened following the creation of the Chief of Defence Staff in 2019. The plan, viewers, is now expected to be placed before the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and, if approved, will be implemented in phases over the coming years. It marks a significant step towards building a more integrated and future-ready Indian military. Let's now take a look at what the Integrated Theatre Command is and what was the timeline of this process. And now, viewers, let me show you that on the big screen. Now, the Integrated Theatre Command, one of the biggest military reforms planned for the Indian Armed Forces, is what we're discussing. In simple terms, viewers, one commander, one mission, 3 services working together at a theatre commander will a theatre commander will have operational control over the Indian Army units, the Indian Air Force assets, the Indian Navy assets where required. Why India wants it? Let's discuss that in detail. Now, the reform is aimed at faster military decision making, better coordination among the 3 services, and optimum use of military resources. Let's now talk about another different aspect, viewers, which is that how is it different from the current system? The Army has 7 operational commands, the Air Force 7 commands and Navy 3 commands. Each service plans and operates through its own chain of command versus one unified commander controls forces from all 3 services within a theatre. So this is a stark difference, viewers, that we're seeing in the mode of operation here. Now, since when has it been in process? 1999 Kargil Review Committee. After the Kargil War, the committee recommended greater jointness among the armed forces. So this idea had come about soon after the Kargil War. Interestingly, viewers, and in 2001, the group of ministers endorsed reforms for better military integration. So that's, of course, the development that happened in the year 2001. And now let's talk about 2020. Now, the appointment of Chief of Defence Staff and creation of the Department of Military Affairs gave fresh momentum. This, of course, viewers, is a development in the year 2020. Now let's talk about 2020 to 2021. Now, there's a detailed discussion which began among the Army, Navy and Air Force. Several models for theatre commands were proposed, which is in this timeline. Now, December 2021, let's talk about that here. CDS General Bipin Rawat, the strongest advocate of theatre commands, died in a helicopter crash, slowing the process. This, of course, viewers, is a tragedy that all of us remember. Extremely unfortunate, and of course, this is a huge loss to the Indian defence. 2023, the Chiefs of Staff Committee and the CDS held multiple rounds of consultations to resolve differences over command structures and resource allocation. So multiple rounds of meetings and consultations were held, viewers. That's, of course, in the year 2023. So this, viewers, of course, is the Integrated Theatre Command that we have told you about, and what is really the difference when it comes to the previous style of operation. Joining me now on the broadcast, and an absolute honor to speak to you, Lieutenant Colonel Tarun Kumar Egg. He's, of course, the former Deputy Chief of the Army Staff. And Lieutenant General Kumar, welcome. And the question to you to begin with is that why has a time come now for integrated theatre commands, according to you?
The requirement of this integrated theatre commands, as you have brought out, was felt essentially from a long time back. And it has been 7 years from the time, this entire thought had come. And you had our Honorable Prime Minister in 2019 during his independence speech. He talked about the integration of the Air Force, Navy, and the Army, and to optimize the resources and to bring in synergy. And thereafter, as you brought out, you had the creation of the Department of Military Affairs on 1st January 2020, the appointment of the CDS, and you also brought out about the push given by General Rawat and then, of course, by General Chauhan. I feel that this particular thing had to be done quite some time back. Theaterization is a sine qua non for the Indian Armed Forces. Today, as you see, we are in the midst of a global churn. You are seeing the affairs which are taking place, the geopolitical, geoeconomic, and the other challenges that the world is facing. You have the US, Iran, Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine. You see how the Chinese are also rising up in their own. And we have our borders that we're talking about with Pakistan, and you, of course, have the military juggernaut of China, which is there towards our northern borders. And thereafter, you also have to deal with the operational, strategic, and tactical challenges which are posed by the humongous changes that are taking place in the character of war. Today, you have to take lessons from what has happened earlier. Like one has wisely said, you cannot fight what you're going to fight the next war cannot be what you fought earlier. And therefore, you have to go in for changes. And the theaterization and the creation of theatre commands is a positive step in this direction. Well, if you say that what actually triggered off, what to my knowledge is, you had the Combined Commanders Conference, which took place in Kolkata. That was in 2025 in the month of September, wherein again, it was, the theme was the year of reforms and the transformation for the future. And the buzzwords that were sounded over there was institutional reforms, modernization, increased jointness, interoperability, multi-domain operational readiness, and technological modernization. And I guess a sort of a warning signal was sent at that time that let us get into theaterization and let us be prepared. Our Indian defense ecosystem, we have evolved over a period of time, but it is in the midst of a global churn. We need to come out of this. We need to anticipate changes, the whatever is coming in front of us, and we require to drive what are the positive measures that are required to overcome these challenges. And therefore, we have an accelerated means of going in for theaterization. A large amount of work has been done as far as theaterization is concerned, as you rightly brought out over the period of time. A large number of iterations as to how these theatre commands are going to evolve, how will the resources being distributed. And I think finally, it is time that we realize that the creation is most necessary, and we have to now announce its creation and spell out the timelines for it to come into position.
Right, Lieutenant General Kumar, I also want to ask you that, will theatre commanders have greater operational autonomy, and how will responsibilities be divided between them, the service chiefs and the Chief of Defence Staff?
An excellent question. This is generally a doubt created in the minds of the people who read about theatre commands or come to hear about theatre commands. So, who is a theatre commander, especially? You have a theatre commander is basically responsible for an area of particular operations where the Army, Air Force, and the naval resources are placed under him, so that he can synergize the resources and respond at a time which is quite effective as far as he's concerned. And therefore, he has an area of responsibility, he has an area of interest. And this particular theater command, which is there, he is only responsible for the entire operational area of that theater. For example, let's take a Western theater. So he's responsible for this, the area spelled out, and he's responsible of combining all the Air Force, Army resources which are there, synergizing it, and he's able to respond to the multi-domain threats which are there. Now, how is it different from the service chiefs? Now, the theater commander, as you see, has got a total operational responsibility. Hereinafter, once the responsibilities are divided, the service chief will be responsible for raise, train, and sustain. That is called the RTS functions. He'll only be responsible for raising, training, and sustaining the forces, more of an administrative nature of duties, and also the other administrative aspects which are associated with the Army, Air Force, and Navy. Therefore, you'll have the service chiefs as well as the theater commanders. So there is the distinct difference between their charter role and responsibilities. Theater commander more operational, and a service chief will be more administrative.
Right. Now, I also have another question with you, which is that according to you, what lessons can India draw from countries such as the US and China, both of which operate theater command structures?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one point that I forgot to mention in my earlier what I have to say was that when it comes to the rank and structure of a theater commander and the service chief, it will be the same. That point I had to make it, I somehow forgot. So as far as their equivalence is concerned, he will be the same appointment, the same importance that a service chief have. If a service chief is 4 stars, he'll also be a 4 stars. Now coming to your question as far as the lessons, yeah. So what we have done as far as what the evolving of a theater command is concerned, we have analyzed the structures of all the nations, UK, US, as well as the Chinese, models which are there. And therefore, you don't have a sort of a one size fits all sort of a logic in this. So therefore, whatever is suitable to us as far as the geographical areas is concerned will be taken into account, and the aspects about combining the resources, also having your cyber space, etc., integrated along with the Army, Air Force, Navy, and how we respond as far as the our reactions are concerned, that is peculiar as far as our nation is concerned. So having studied all those models, we are possibly coming up with a particular model which suits the Indian system. And it also dependent on the threats that we face when we talk of the western borders, we talk of the northern borders, or the maritime in the east. In this respect, this particular aspect or threat was felt earlier, and therefore we had the creation of the Andaman Nicobar Command in 2001 to look after the maritime operations in the Eastern Theatre. We also had the Strategic Forces Command created in 2003, and that was to deal with the nuclear deterrence and strategic operations. So such steps have taken place, and now is the time for the theatre commands to come into existence.
Right. Now, Lieutenant General Kumar, I also want to understand from you that from the perspective of military leadership, what changes in training, doctrine and mindset will be essential for this reform to succeed?
Oh, very much, very much. Before I come to this question of yours, I would like to also say that when I say the large amount of progress or work has been done on this field, you have a lot of amount of jointness that has come in. Like we had General Chauhan talk about the jointness 2.0. Jointness as a culture. You have Army culture, Air Force culture, Navy culture, and you have a jointness as a culture. Therefore, you come to know what is happening as far as the other services concerned. Therefore, the inter-services postings are very important, and you have people of the Air Force posted to the Navy to the Army, and things of that nature. So you also have those services which can be integrated. For example, the cyber, which is a very important, the informations, which is very important. So these things have been integrated from long back. And that is how this culture of jointness is very important in order to remain interoperable. You have to understand the other systems. Also, I would like to mention at this juncture that you had this bill passed in 2023 known as the Inter-Services Organization Bill, ISO bill. Now that gives the sort of authority to any commander to administer administrative and disciplinary powers to all the three services. Meaning to say that if you have a particular institution or a structure where the army person is highermost, he can now, without any problem, look into the issues as far as the Air Force and Navy disciplinary aspects, administrative aspects, which earlier was a problem. There were large number of encumbrances, impediments, so those things have been removed. So therefore, this interface has been created between the Army, Air Force, and Navy. Now, coming to your question, as far as the training and the leadership is concerned, firstly, I will deal with training. As you see, when we look at the theater commands, we also talk about the technology, absorption. You see, 2024 was declared in the Indian Army as the year of technology absorption. And from 2024 to 2033, it was known as the decade of transformation. Therefore, when we talk of theater command, we are talking of interoperability. We are talking of the communications being integrated, the intelligence, the surveillance, everything. So AI-based systems, quantum, everything. And therefore is the aspect about training. You need to have techno warriors. You need to have people qualified in the various systems. Therefore there's an upgrade in a person's educational qualification, in his training, in technology, in AI, how to communicate, how to locate surveillance, then how the drones operate. You have a humongous number of things in which people have to be adept. They have to be trained in that. And the training started. And only of the systems can you operate in a multi-domain environment. So multi-domain operations is also going to form a very important part of the integrated theater command. Not only in the Army, Air Force, the land and sea domain, but the cyber space, information, perception management, all specialized operations. What training has to undergo, is now presently undergoing. You have to have the cyber warriors, the techno warriors, to have the space specialists. You name a particular discipline, and a person has to be trained in that. Leadership has to be of the highest order. Strategic leadership. Firstly, a person who's now a leader now has to look into. He has to be a leader of the Army, Air Force, in the sense that now he has got the forces under him. He is a leader of integrated theater command, and so will be the structures which are under him. So therefore, he has to have a total broad and strategic outlook. He has to be trained in taking decisions. He has to know how to sift information, how to come to the intelligence picture, how to come to a decision as quickly as possible, and to respond as early as possible. Therefore, his education level, his takeoff level, his knowledge base has to be very high, and for that he needs to train accordingly. And both leadership and training are very, very important as far as the creation of theater commands is concerned.
So it's been an absolutely enlightening conversation that we've had. I thank you very much. And of course, viewers, we have the former Deputy Chief of the Army Staff. He's a very, very senior defense personnel who's been here on NewsX to explain this to us. And so, of course, we're all very proud of our Indian defense, and this perhaps adds a feather to that cap. We have a stellar Indian defense, viewers, and this will, of course, add another dimension to our Indian defense. Thank you, sir, for joining me on the broadcast.
Thank you so much for having me on your channel. Thank you so much.
And now moving forward, viewers.